our whole family were really, really close. I don't have the same story that he suffered from mental illness or he suffered from growing up, from experiencing being a teenager. And I personally come from a really dysfunctional home where there was a lot of abuse and a lot of lies, and I grew up in a house that I felt like when I had my own kids, they were going to be in this really safe environment, and they could tell me anything. They could share anything, and we would work through everything together. And I would love them so much that they would be safe, and they would be happy, and everything would be great. And I believed that with every part of me. And my boys shared just about everything with me. And one of the many mistakes I made as a parent is in creating that environment where I felt they could tell me anything, I forgot the importance of privacy, that they deserved to have secrets, that they deserved to cry and me not fix it. But I didn't know that. I thought that I could make everything better for them. And Aaron was this brilliant young man who showed up in life. He stood up for what he believed in. He dared to be different. He dared to challenge authority in the most respectful way. He was admired by his peers and teachers. It was an honor to be his mom, really. I mean, there were times when I'd go, it was hard to parent him. I mean, he was involved in the Phoenix Boys Choir, which was a very difficult thing to get into. And I wanted him to be in the Phoenix Boys Choir, and I understood what an honor that was. And Aaron had long hair, and these kids all had the short hair and their little ties, and Aaron, had this long hair, and he's like, whoa, what am I doing here, And he didn't feel as good as the other kids, and he told me he was going to quit the choir. And I said, no, you're not going to quit the choir. This is an honor, And a week later, I get a call from the choir master, and he said, well, Aaron quit the choir. And I said, he did? And I said, well, let me talk to him. And he said to me, and he was only 13 then, and he looked at me and he said, this is my life, and I'm not going to live your dreams in my life. And I was like, well, how do you respond to that? As a parent, you're like, well, you are going to live my dreams, I mean, he quit the boys' choir, and that's the kind of kid he was. And he was a writer. Writing was his life, and he was articulate. And then the summer of 8th grade, going into his freshman year, he started lying to me and smoking pot. And you would have thought the kid was an axe murderer. I mean, when he lied to me, I can't even explain to you. It was my stuff that I came to the table as a parent with. And I feel like, and I'm sure Bob doesn't see it that way, but I overreacted in retrospect, to so many things. But he started smoking pot, and I could have overlooked that if his grades would have, he was a really good student and loved learning, but his grades were dropping. And then he started doing acid, and he'd have a bad trip and ask his friends to bring him home to his mom. So the kids would pull up and throw him out of the van because nobody wanted to get caught, and Aaron would come in the house and want me, and he'd be higher than a kite and having this horrible trip. And I'd sit up with him all night, and one of the kids, after he died, said to me, they came over one night, and Aaron said, oh, this is the album my mom and I listened to when I was tripping. And they said, you tripped with your mom? And they said, no, but she stayed up with me, and this is the album. So we had this really great, strong relationship. And you think that these things can't happen to families that are really close and really communicating, but it does. And so then he started crying, and he asked me to let him go to public school, and that was a big ordeal. And I let him go to public school. He had always gone to private school, and he got jumped by a gang there, and the gang, it was the Crips gang from LA had infiltrated Phoenix High School, and they were going to shoot him, and they had a nickname for him. And I said, do you know, Aaron, they have a nickname for you? Tells me that you know these people. And no, he didn't know them, and blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway, we took him out of school. I feared for his life. He was really struggling. The light in his eyes was going out. He was miserable and crying and just not himself, but he couldn't tell me. I became the enemy because he'd look at me and feel bad about himself. And really, I didn't know how to help Aaron. I didn't know what to do for him. And someone told me about Northstar Expedition, somebody from the private school that he had gone to. And I called the parent whose son had gone to this program, and you know, she said her son is really not a great kid, and he's back on the street, but she thought the program was really good, and you know, they go out in the wilderness and da-da-da-da-da. Well, what attracted me to the program was part of the program was he had to write in a journal. It was a big part of the program, and he was a writer. And he also liked solitude, and I thought, you know, this sounds like he's gonna think he's on vacation, actually. So after a really awful meeting with his teachers, and Aaron was kicking a chair over, and he was angry, which really wasn't his personality, I called Northstar. And Bob and I met with them in Phoenix. They happened to be in town. And I had told Aaron if I couldn't find a situation to put him in because we had taken him out of high school, that he was gonna have to go to Northstar and hike and camp for 60 days and then get back into private school for the summer. But I was lying. I had told him that before I'd even contacted Northstar. I was trying to scare him and, you know, this is what's going to happen. But it turns out that after meeting with Northstar, I asked every question I thought a parent could ask. I mean, I asked about sexual abuse. What if these kids are in the wilderness and somebody's abusing them? You know, how would we know? And I said, you know, Aaron can't afford to lose any weight. He's 5'11 and a half, and he weighed 134 pounds. And I said, I'm worried about him hiking and losing weight. And they grabbed my hand and they said, we would never let him lose weight. We actually, we're used to kids coming here undernourished, and we give them this drink that, you know, gives them vitamins. They had an answer for everything I said. I wasn't looking for a boot camp. I didn't even know the term boot camp then. I was looking for an outward bound program with therapy. And they said that the kids hike all day, and then they meet with Doc Dave and they discuss their issues. And this Lance Jagger, who owned the program, said to me, you know, he was this great big rough guy and, you know, not exactly a rocket scientist. And he said, you know, I have a way with kids. And kids seem to let their guard down after hiking all day with me, and they can talk to me, and they sit around, and, you know, it made sense to me. I mean, I thought it sounded so great, where he would be away from music and his friends, and, you know, he would be able to communicate with these people and refocus his life. And so we made the choice to send him, and they said, well, we're in town. We flew here they were visiting family in Phoenix, and they said, we'll just come in the house and get Aaron tomorrow. And that made sense. And they said to me, you know, if you drive him to Utah, he'll start, you know, bargaining with you and, you know, trying to manipulate you, and we'll just come in, we'll get him, and he'll go. So when people accuse me of having my child kidnapped, I really have a breakdown, because he wasn't being kidnapped. Aaron knew about Northstar when they came in the house. As a matter of fact, his older brother knew he was going, and Aaron was fully dressed in the morning when they came, and I know Jared had told Aaron that they were coming. So I just really struggle with people saying I had him kidnapped. But anyway, they took him. And Aaron was really angry, but he didn't say fuck you and scream and yell like that's in the movie. I just have to say that, because he was more respectful than that. But
I yelled and said fuck you.
yeah, all right, okay, all right.
Myself into that.
All right. Well, Aaron,
myself into Aaron, and I apologize.
and so the movie for me, I'm like, oh my God, he wouldn't have done that. He was really respectful, but apparently he was very disrespectful to the Northstar people on the airplane. And when he got to Northstar, after the first day, he went in the office and he apologized. And he said, you know, it's not my way to behave this way. And I was angry. And they called me and they said, you know, Aaron came into the office and he told us he was sorry for behaving that way. He's such a liar and manipulator, you know, and we told him that. And I'm like, he's not a liar and manipulator. It's really who he is, you know. Well, he's a liar and a manipulator. Anyway, you know, 3 weeks went by. I wasn't allowed to have any contact with him, but I called there weekly. How's Aaron doing, you know, and what's going on? And well, he's, you know, he's defiant. And I said, you know, it doesn't sound like Aaron. And then the night before he died, they called me and said, Aaron's going to have to repeat the first leg of the program because he's bargaining for food and he's defiant. And I said, you're describing somebody I don't even know. And I said, you know, he didn't write me a letter after 3 weeks. And they said, well, we'll look into that. Well, the next day he died. And I thought to myself, why is he bargaining for food? You know, why is he? Well, so then they call us and Aaron, they tell me Aaron's down and they can't get a pulse. And it never occurred to me he was dead. I sent this healthy 16-year-old boy off, and I'm like, well, they said you need to call the hospital. And Aaron was denied food 14 of the 12 days he hiked 8 to 10 miles a day. He had no food at all. He was made to sleep without a sleeping bag in temperatures below 32 degrees, without a blanket, away from the fire. He lost control of his bodily functions 2 weeks before he died. He was going to the bathroom all over himself. Nobody helped him. He begged to see a doctor, and they called him a faker. And he documented this in his journal, and he begged them to see a doctor. And he said, if you think I'm lying, punish me accordingly, but please get me to a doctor. And they called him a slacker and a faker and humiliated him. And when he died, there wasn't one person there that knew how to do CPR. And they were making fun of him as he died. He was, you know, he was delirious and he was in hypothermia and he had lost 20% of his body weight. They sent us a body unrecognizable. I wouldn't have known it was him except for the scar above his eye. He was 108 pounds and emaciated in 30 days. And
They took a Polaroid to make fun of him.
They made him.
It was actually a Polaroid of what he looks like the day
and
he died.
his ribs are sticking out, and
like,
it was an Auschwitz. You know, I mean, that's what he looked like. He looked. You know, I wasn't. You know, I mean, they lied to me. Whatever I asked, they told me what I wanted to hear. And one of the boys that had been with Aaron was from Phoenix, and his father was an attorney. And they were very angry with us because, you know, we didn't have a lawsuit against the state of Utah, brought the lawsuit. But this man said that he knew it was a boot camp. He wanted a boot camp, and he knew it was a boot camp, and the Bacons knew it too. Well, he knew it was a boot camp because he wanted a boot camp, and that's what they sold him. It was a boot camp. I wanted an outward bound program, you know, and found out that Lance Jagger, who told me he's so good with kids, he wasn't even allowed to be with kids because he was responsible for another girl's death in a different program, and Utah licensed him and Bill Henry to have their own program and let them write the guidelines because they turned state evidence against the other program. So I'm going to turn this over to my husband now because I could just go on and on. It's just
I could probably go on and on too, but I'm Aaron Bacon's dad, and he died in Northstar 20 years ago, and he's now been gone longer than we had him, and that experience profoundly changed our lives, and all of our family's lives, or all the members of our family were profoundly changed by his death. When we heard that he had died, of course, we had no idea what had been going on, and accidents happen, and we assumed that hiking in the wilderness, you fall and maybe you die. Everything that we learned from that first notice was more and more gruesome. Sal shared with you some of the details of how the kids were abused, and by withholding food and withholding shelter and withholding heat, we learned a lot of these details because the state of Utah filed charges. Actually, I believe that there were 9 felony charges and 13 misdemeanor charges of child abuse against the owners of the program and the so-called counselors of the program. And what we learned was that there's actually an industry that abuses kids in the name of love, and in the name of therapy, and in the name of helping, and it was an awful awakening, and that industry operates largely in the regulatory cracks. They aren't too good, from what I can tell, in actually helping children. They're great at marketing. They're great at mind control. They're really excellent at abuse. They seem to have a lot of the characteristics that were described by the first speaker this morning on cult behavior. And as we went through the trials and watched these young kids who were counselors sit on the stand and tell their stories, it became really clear that these kids were abused too. These kids were led to believe that this is how you treat people in the name of love, that this is how you should behave when you have your own children. This is how you discipline. And that was heartbreaking. It remains a very heartbreaking reality about this whole subject that we're all here talking about, is that there are so many people who are not just abusing the children, the direct victims, but they're abusing families, they're abusing the community, they're abusing our society with this kind of distorted thinking and behavior. And they are preying on parents who are in distress. We're desperate, and it might be desperate for reasons that you later may wonder why, as in our case, why were we so desperate? Or it may be reasons that everyone would recognize as real desperation. But parenting is a difficult job, and when you don't know what to do, you've tried all of the things that you know to do, as soon as you reach out, there are these companies, these businesses who are ready to step in and impose their way of doing things on your family. And it's been, Aaron was not the first death in these programs. Kathy Sutton, whose daughter Michelle had died a few years before Aaron, was the first person to awaken us to the fact that, well, this is not uncommon. And Aaron was not the last death in these programs. There have been way too many deaths, and our
To this day. This is 20 years ago, Aaron.
yeah, since then, and our hope is that we have opportunities like the one that we have today to awaken parents to the risks that are involved in these programs. We've had a number of people who have heard of our story and call us and say, you know, we're thinking about putting our child in this program or that. What do you think? And of course, what we think is that they're tremendously risky. Do not put your child in a program where the policy is no communication. You know, do not put your child in a program where they're in isolation. There are so many things to look out for that parents are just unaware of, and organizations and efforts like this one, the work that people like Nick have done to shine some light on this industry is really important work. The work that Cynthia and her family have done in trying to change and bring about legislation that might reduce the number of these kinds of cases is really important work. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all, and I'll answer any questions later on if anybody.
Just one thing, and if I missed it, I apologize. Did you mention what the end result of your case against Northstar was?
No, here's where it gets really sad. They pled out and received essentially a slap on the hand of community service. So the judge determined that it really wasn't, the sentencing wasn't about Aaron. It was really about what was best for the counselors and the owners. And so the owners were not allowed to participate in child care programs. They since did. You know, you just go to another state and get another job and carry on. They had been involved in the death of a child in another program before they started their own. And as my wife just mentioned, they were consulted by the state of Utah to write the regulations in the state of Utah. I mean, we got a problem here, folks. And one of the realities is you can have the best regulations in the world, but if they're not enforceable, if you don't have the staff to enforce them, the money to enforce them, or if they're inaccessible as they are in wilderness programs or operating offshore, there are so many ways for these companies to sidestep programs and operate in the shadows and in the cracks that it's a very scary and dangerous situation.
I would just like to say the owners pled out. 6 people, I think, pled out. One young counselor said, "Fuck you. A felony means nothing to me. Take me to trial." And the way they put the pleading out to us was, you know, you don't have to go through a trial and hear all the awful things that were done to Aaron. They're taking responsibility and saying it was negligent homicide. Well, the one counselor said, you know, take me to trial. We had to sit through a trial and listen to this counselor actually brag about how he took Aaron and shoved his face in the ground and how he claimed anarchy day and would beat Aaron. And so he was found guilty, and he was given a year in jail and was out in 3 months. And when he came up for his parole or whatever you call it to get out, I sent a letter to the judge because I couldn't get there. And the judge said in the courtroom that Sally Bacon wrote a very moving letter, but that she has to understand that it's no longer about what's best for Aaron, it's what's best for Craig. And so he was out in 3 months. He raped somebody. He was caught in Colorado with a weapon. So, you know, it really was, nothing happened to them, really, quite frankly. So.
I'm Theresa.
Oh, whose name? Craig Fisher. Craig Fisher.
Thank you. I just want to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Let me test something.
I'm Theresa, Nick's sister. I am a little more than a year older than him. We've heard a lot of powerful stories tonight, or this afternoon, and I just want to thank my brother for putting together the panel, and also Jody for having the convention. It's an important one. So a little bit more background to our family. Nick and I grew up partners in crime, and sometimes I felt like I could talk him down and that type of thing, but we also very much got into trouble together and had similar sets of friends, and I was friends with the older kids, so he was friends with the much older kids. So when my brother got taken to the program, and I still can't figure out how he got tricked into shopping on a school day. But when he got taken into the program, about 2 or 3 weeks later, I went in for an interview, which I was convinced that I was there to convince my brother to come out, because I thought that we had more of a say than we ever did. And so I thought I was going there to talk some sense into him, and that it was time to come out, and we were going, you know, to do better. And, you know, during the short time he was in and I wasn't in yet,